What is going on to all my movie fans out there, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with a brand new movie review, and today we're discussing a new Amazon horror thriller which premiered at Sundance earlier this year by the name of Master. Got a chance to recently check it out, and I'm really excited to share my thoughts with you all and let you know if this horror thriller is worth giving a watch, all in this spoiler-free review. Before we break it all down, make sure you're checking me out on all my other social media accounts. If you all are new to the channel, we are building something special here, and I want you all to be a part of it. So if you love early movie reviews, TV reviews, and live streams, well, come and join the community by subscribing and hitting that notification bell. As you can see on the screen now, if you enjoyed this spoiler-free movie review, well, make sure to give it a thumbs up and also share it to anyone and everyone you know that might be interested in this film. But more importantly, once you've seen Master, what did you think? I want to know your positives and your negatives, but more importantly, let's talk about the performances, the direction. How did you think the social commentary was handled in this film? Were you horrified by it? Were you entertained? Were you disappointed? Were there some unanswered questions that left you confused? Let's talk about it all as a community in the comments below. So for me personally, I was very excited for this film. When I saw the trailer a couple months ago, or maybe it was about a month and a half ago, I was hooked. Number one, you know me. I love a good horror. I love a good thriller. And I like when a film has something to say. Like my favorite horrors, every horror film has some type of message, right? And it's just how they handle the message and the social commentary that the film has to add based on the trailer. I'm like, okay, I'm intrigued. But then Regina Hall, I have been a fan of hers since the late 90s. Your best men's in the world, your loving basketballs, your scary movies, but I really had never seen Regina in a more serious role. So I was really excited for that. Is it worth checking out? Well, let's break it all down. I want to start off talking about the directorial debut of Mariama Diallo, who I, again, never heard of her. First time seeing a project of hers, but I have to say, I was very impressed because this film, number one, it reminds me of two films in particular, and it's its own film. It stands alone. It doesn't take a lot from these films, but it reminded me a lot of Get Out meets Loose, and I'll explain that a little bit later. But I thought that she did such a good job of kind of expressing her thoughts on microaggressions, about social commentary regarding racism and the horror of racism, but also just the way she paced the film, put the film together, how she builds tension, how it is a bit of a slow burn, but it has some interesting payoffs and some reveals and some twists I didn't see coming. So I always love discovering and finding new talent, and based on this directorial debut, oh yeah, Diallo, I will be looking for more of your projects moving forward because I thought she did such a great job of tackling this film. And there are some criticisms we'll get into a little bit later, but I thought, again, she did a great job. But I want to touch on this narrative. Now, if you all aren't too familiar with Master, it basically follows two black women who are on this college campus, which is just primarily white people. So we have Regina Hall, who plays Gail Bishop, who she is the first black woman to be the master of the school. She's worked to get to this point. She's ignored some things to get to this point, which we'll talk about here. But then there's a young lady by the name of Jasmine. She's a freshman entering this primarily like 95% white campus. In her life, from what you kind of gather from the film, she might be a person that really has never come across controversy regarding her skin, her being black, but now being in this position with being like the only like one of 8 black people on this campus, she's starting to see some of those microaggressions. So what I loved about the first 2 acts of this film is we're watching these two characters navigate through the campus and navigate through racism, but at the same time, we have this disturbing, sinister, kind of supernatural myth that's going on for both of our characters. And to kind of shine a light on those two performances, starting off with Regina Hall, I said I've really never seen her in a dramatic role. Well, after this, I want to see her do more because I really enjoyed the narrative of Gail. And Gail's the type of person that she has worked very hard to become the first black master of the school. But at the same time, and what I like about the social commentary, because there are some people that I know that do this, they put their head down, right? When they're surrounded, when they're the only black person in the room, they kind of ignore the slight little racism, the slight kind of microaggressions, the slight kind of like, oh, you're black, so you know this type of experience. Oh, you black, tell us about your black experience. And she just kind of, swallows her tongue and just kind of puts a smile on because she knows that if she lets her anger out, she might not get the position that she's looking for. So I really enjoyed the narrative that she goes on in the film where she kind of has ignored the racism on the campus, and it's kind of hard for her to interact with Jasmine at that point, which we'll talk about here, when she's dealing with racism and how Gail handles that racism. She kind of says, she knows that it's there, but she has just suppressed it so much. She kind of just makes it seem like it's normal. So I really enjoyed the character art that we got with Gale, as well as kind of the discovery she has when she moves into the master house and she kind of puts two and two together. I'm black. What is the school trying to use me as we know, the token black person? So I kind of enjoyed the discovery that she goes on through this narrative. But switching over to a young lady that this is my first time coming across her, and that's Zoe Regina, who plays Jasmine, our Coley of this film. Again, she's a freshman on this campus. She has never really come across a lot of controversy with her being black, but now being on this campus, she's getting questioned if she's stealing things, is she, coming across as too aggressive when she gets certain grades with another character that we'll talk about here in a second. But I was very impressed by her performance in this film because, again, she has two things that she's tackling with, just as Regina Hall is, which is, number one, the verbal and the discomfort that she's getting from the white people on the campus, whether it's teachers, whether it's librarians, whether it's her roommate. But then more in particularly, without giving too much away, this film has this supernatural element regarding the room that she's in. Way back when, there was a person that was killed in that room, and the urban legend is it haunts people. So she's tackling not only the literal racism, but then the metaphor of racism and what it can mean from this apparent witch that haunts her room. So I really enjoyed what she went through, her confronting racism, how it is very foreign to her. She's just like, why are people treating me this way? Why are they assuming that I have this type of experience? Why are they assuming that I have this type of a lifestyle or mindset? I'm just here to try to get good grades. I come from the suburbs. I come from a loving home. Don't put me in a stereotype. So I really enjoyed the narrative that Jasmine went on, and I thought that performance by that young lady was incredible. So the two main performances to me were the standouts of the film. And again, the way the film tackles, I know for a lot of people, and I have these type of thoughts sometimes too when it comes to black movies, black shows, mainly focusing on racism and discrimination, and it can be very tiring, right? Especially when it's done bad, like Antebellum, just that comes to the top of my mind. But what I like about this film is it does have something to say, and that's one of my biggest things when we have those type of films, slavery films, stuff like that. We get so many a year, and a lot of them don't turn out well. But the thing that I liked what this film had to add was it's adding something to the conversation. It adds to what does it look like when you have a black person or any minority that ignores those microaggressions and what it can lead to, right? And when you have that type of mindset of ignoring that, you can't help someone that needs you, right? And that's the situation, that's the conflict at hand that Regina Hall deals with. Is she's suppressed this racism so much, she's just dealt with it so much that when Jasmine comes to her and say, I need your help, is very foreign to her because she's just like, well, it's just the way it is, right? It's America, right? So I love that the film has something to say about don't ignore the racism, address it head on, help those that might be a younger generation, help them understand it, help them kind of navigate and help to make a change. So I love that the film had that to add to the conversation versus other things that I've seen in the last few years that have had this type of social commentary. They don't have anything to add to the conversation. So I enjoyed that narrative that we got with the script. And also I will say it is a horror film. It is a thriller film. We'll get to my criticism with that a little bit later, but there were some moments that had me, I love watching horror at night. And there's a moment I'll just say it involves late at night and something under the bed. I'll just leave that. That scene really kind of got to me. So I will say for the horror elements, for my really horror fans out there, it's not as prominent as I wanted it to be, but it does have some highlights addressing kind of the horrific, more tropes that you might want to expect in this type of narrative. So getting into my criticisms here, I will say, I mentioned how the film focuses on Jasmine and Gale, but there is a character by the name Liv, who is another black woman who is introduced in the film as a teacher who's trying to get her tenure in the school, and she has an issue with Jasmine that kind of caused a little bit of conflict. She was in the first half, in the second half, but in the third act, they throw something at you that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth because we really didn't build up to that point of the character. Again, I'm being very vague about what I'm talking of here because once you see the film, you know what I'm talking about. But it kind of came out of left field. It was a twist I didn't see coming, but it was a twist that didn't have much of a payoff because we didn't lead up into that point. So again, I thought that the actress, who I know is a Broadway star, she's great in the film, don't get me wrong, but I felt like the way they wrote that character into the narrative, it just didn't piece well with the first two acts of the film, which brings me to the piecing of the puzzles. I thought that the social commentary, the drama, the racism that the film tackles was highlighted pretty well, but I don't know if I like the horror element and the supernatural element that the film added because, and again, there are some questions that you all may have. Was it real? Was it fake? And, without giving too much away, but I almost feel like the film could have went without the horror elements. More so, again, racism is horrific, right? But I'm talking about the supernatural horror elements. I almost feel like they could have went away with that because it didn't really add much to the narrative and it almost kind of distracted away from the more seriousness of the story. Again, it wasn't like handled terribly. I just feel like it didn't mix well within the main narrative that the film was trying to tell. And then wrapping up the film, it is a slow burn in the first two halves, which, like I said, I enjoy those narratives and the commentary and everything that the film had to offer. But I always look forward to, I can take in a slow burn if it has a good payoff. And for me, first two acts were really solid, very engaging, but when we get to that third act with the Liv introduction to her twist and how they end Jasmine's narrative and how we see Gail comes to this type of realization, I don't feel like the lead up led to a satisfying payoff for me. I wasn't disappointed, I was just underwhelmed, and I wish, again, that it didn't throw in the horror elements because it took away from what they were building to. So for me, it didn't really have the best payoff. So those are kind of my main criticisms. Before I give you my overall thoughts and give you my score, if you haven't already, make sure to like the video, share it, comment below, and of course, subscribe to the channel. Overall, Master, like I said, I highlight the main performances, the direction, the social commentary the film had to add. It does have some nice tinge of horror every now and then, but I thought that the horror overall didn't mix in with the narrative too much for my personal taste, and I didn't think that it had the satisfying payoff that I was hoping for the conclusion of this film. But overall, I say I have more positives than negatives. Do I recommend you all give it a watch? The answer is yes. I'm going to give Master a solid. I haven't done this in a while. I'm going to give it a 3.4 out of 5. I recommend you all give it a watch. I know it's not going to be for everyone. One, I know that there's people out there that's like, oh, racism, social commentary in my films, I don't want none of that. And then I also know there's the other side of the coin, especially for minorities, people of color like myself, that are just kind of sick and tired of seeing this type of narrative. But I think this is the type of film that does have something to add to the conversation rather than just making it a part of media just to be a part of media. So I do think it's that type of film with some of my criticisms, but I do recommend you all give it a watch. Again, 3.4 out of 5. That's my thoughts. I want to know yours in the comments. Again, pros, cons, performances, direction. Did you find it to be scary? Did you think that it had a lot to add to the conversation? Were you disappointed? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. Thank you for watching this review. Hope you're staying safe. As you all can see on the screen now, subscribe to the channel, check out my other content. We'll catch you on the next video.